And if I could go ahead and just get a mic check on you, Councilmember Coombs.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Sure can.
Right.
All righty. And I guess I should introduce myself as well here. Juan Marcano. I have the honor and pleasure of representing Ward 4 and chairing TAPS. And we are, unfortunately, we appear to be missing Councilmember.
I am here.
Oh,
I apologize.
there she is. All right.
I was fighting with the router for internet, so my apologies, but I'm here.
All right, awesome. Welcome, Councilmember Murillo. All right, so let's move down to item 2, approval of the June 30th meeting minutes. I did not have any changes. Did you, Councilmember Murillo or Coombs?
Nope, I'm good.
All right. Councilmember Murillo?
None here.
None? All right, great. So those will be approved. We have nothing under consent, so let's move into general business. So item 4A, update on the 13th Avenue study. So yeah, I think Hulong, you've got the floor for this one, right?
Actually, that's myself, Tom Worker Braddock.
Oh, I apologize, Tom. All right, you've got the floor, sir. Please scribe is slowing down on me here.
Yeah. Okay, is that sharing?
Yep.
Okay. So, as mentioned, I'm Tom Worker Braddock, Senior Transportation Planner. I'm providing a project update on 13th Avenue Multimodal Corridor Study. The purpose of this is to identify ways to make it more comfortable, convenient, safer for people to travel along or across 13th Avenue, including people walking or bicycling. Today I'll be talking about a brief background of this study and a very brief corridor overview, but I'll be spending most of the time focusing on what we've heard from the public and the preferred alternative going forward. Let me see if, okay, there we go. They're sharing, right?
Yep, it's sharing.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. In 2018, the city participated in a Complete Streets Consortium with other local cities and national experts and used 13th Avenue as a case study, where these participants brainstormed how to make the street more comfortable for people that walk or bike on it. We used the materials from that consortium to submit and receive a Dr. Tip grant for this study. The map shows the study area. It generally goes from 12th and Yosemite on the west to the Highline Canal past Chambers on the east. This alignment would connect the Highline Canal Trail, the Tollgate Creek Trail, and the Wesley Creek Trail. On the east, using 12th Avenue allows us to connect directly into Denver's planned bicycle network. There are 11 schools within a quarter mile of 13th Avenue, and directly on the street, there's 3 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, and a high school. 13th Avenue parallels Colfax Avenue, and we see this as a good opportunity for people that may want to get to Colfax Avenue, but don't necessarily want to walk or bike on Colfax Avenue. And I am not, okay, there we go.
We lost the presentation.
What's that?
We appear to have lost the presentation.
No sharing.
How's that?
There we go.
Apparently, each time I advance a slide, I have a 50-50 chance of turning off the presentation. So, but here's 13th Avenue today. It's generally described as a two-way, two-lane roadway, 36 to 50 feet in width. There's on-street parking on both sides, posted speed limit of 25 to 30 miles per hour. There's bike lanes east of Sable. And from this picture, you can see why people might be tempted to speed. When there's not much parking on the corridor, as is often the case, it presents a wide, flat perspective. Narrow sidewalks predominate on 13th Avenue. If there's more than one person walking, that means others in the group have to either walk in the parking lane or even around parked cars. The top map here shows the speed limits along 13th Avenue, but also the 85th percentile speed, which is the speed 85% of drivers travel along or below. This is generally seen as a measure of how people actually travel. For 13th Avenue, this tells us that people are driving at nearly 5 to 10 miles per hour over the speed limit, depending on the segment, and indicates that for those people, it's comfortable and feels normal to drive faster than the posted speed limit along 13th Avenue. The flip side of this is that those speeding cars make anyone walking or using a bike on the corridor feel less comfortable. The bottom map shows the amount of parking being used on the corridor. We not only looked along 13th Avenue itself, but also one block north and south. We examined parking use at 3 periods: weekday midday between 11 and 1, weekday early morning between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m., and weekend late evening. In all time periods, less than half of parking was actually used along 13th Avenue. When talking about this with the public, several mentioned that folks have had cars hit on 13th Avenue and they were afraid to park there because of the travel speed of vehicles. Now I want to focus on what we've heard from the public throughout this process. We had 3 rounds of reaching out to the public, and they were a mix of virtual meetings, interactive maps where people can make comments, and in-person events. In the first round, most respondents said speeding vehicles, narrow sidewalks, and no safe space to ride a bike were why they felt unsafe traveling on 13th. When asked what would improve traveling, people responded with better crosswalks, wider sidewalks, separation between the road and sidewalks, and bike lanes separated from traffic. Conversely, most respondents said their preferred vision for 13th Avenue in the next 5 to 10 years was where cars still travel the corridor, but feels like bicycling, walking, and transit are on equal footing with car travel. As part of the second round of public engagement, we held a family-friendly streets event in October of last year. This is also known as Tactical Urbanism. It's where we went out to a 2-block section of 13th Avenue right next to Kenton Elementary and St. Teresa Elementary, created wider sidewalks, bike lanes, separated bike lanes, and a shared use path using temporary materials, and invited the public to tell us what they thought about each segment. We held this on a Tuesday afternoon and had everything in place by the time parents started arriving to pick up their kids from school. We incentivized their participation. If people filled out a survey, they would get a pumpkin, this being Halloween season. And if they filled out a survey at each of the different survey stations, they would get a ticket for an entree from the food truck. Unsurprisingly, people liked wider sidewalks, preferred separated bike lanes over regular bike lanes, and liked the shared use path. To make sure people knew about the event, we hand-delivered flyers to all of the households, not only on 13th Avenue itself, but on all of the cross streets, 1 block north and south. We worked with Aurora Police to place 2 variable message signs for 2 weeks along the corridor, and then gave a golden ticket, good for a food truck meal, to the property owners surrounding the event. A physical banner was placed along the corridor, and the event was announced in the Aurora Water newsletter. We also had a public meeting and had online polling for this round. When presenting the alternatives to the public, we first asked them what their top priorities were in the corridor. That's what's presented in the top left graph, with 1 being most important. The top ranked priority was safe routes to school, followed by traffic calming and pedestrian comfort and safety. Maintaining all existing parking or keeping 13th Avenue as it is now ranked least important. Of those 4 alternatives we presented to the public, we asked what features they liked best. Top responses were widened sidewalks and separated bike lanes. When we asked what features people liked least, they chose bike sharing the travel lanes with cars and keeping parking on both sides of the street. We read through the comments and survey responses received from the public in round 2 and presented a refined design to the public at a 3rd round of public involvement in April. We actually had 2 in-person events. An open house was held on April 16th at Aurora West Preparatory School, and then on April 30th, we had a table at the Day of the Children's event hosted by the Village Exchange. This is the preferred alternative that came out of 2 rounds of public engagement, discussion among staff, and an analysis of technical feasibility, and that we presented to the public in the 3rd round. Generally, it can be described as a 10-foot side path on the south side of 13th Avenue and a 6-foot sidewalk on the north side. On-street parking will remain on one side of 13th Avenue. And of course, it's a long corridor, so these dimensions may vary along the corridor once final design is complete. This preferred alternative isn't a one-size-fits-all, and we've identified where it would need to vary to take into account available right-of-way, adjacent land uses, and needs in a context-sensitive manner. The segment between Yosemite and Boston would have 6-foot sidewalks on either side and shared lane arrow markings. This matches what would be going in on the other side of 12th Avenue with the Denver Bicycle Network. As we move further east towards Havana, the corridor features steep grades and mature trees, so the landscape buffer next to the shared use path will be reduced. East of Peoria would have a slightly narrower 8-foot side path that's directly next to the street. Parking would be maintained on both sides of the street at schools. East of Sable, the corridor has more right-of-way available, so we'd be able to do a 12-foot wide shared use path with a landscape buffer while still maintaining parking on both sides of the street. So we're currently reviewing the comments received in the third round of public involvement and refining the concept as appropriate, including in a context-sensitive approach. Then we'll present the full report and concept back to this committee and then present it to the full council. This will then allow us to apply for grants that can bring these designs from the current 15% design up to a 60% design level for specific segments. And with that, I'll take any questions you may have from the committee.
All right. Thank you so much for that update, Tom. And I want to share Councilor Murillo's enthusiasm in the chat that it sounds like the canvassing strategies that were used were really effective to get community feedback. So I just want to applaud y'all for that. And in general, I'm very excited about this project. So my only real concern here is kind of the the lane use proposal. If I can go back to that slide on my end here. Sorry, I'm having some eScribe issues here. All right, yeah. What I've heard from folks who use bikes or want to, utilize bicycles more as their mode of transportation is that sharrows, while appreciated, still generally feel very unsafe. And I can understand why motorists would prefer the sharrows because it more or less keeps the drive lanes intact. But I'm wondering, is there another configuration where we might have at least a second side path, similar to what we see on the left-hand side there, that's kind of more reserved for bicycle use? Because I feel like that's the only, so that we could allow travel in the other direction without having folks, still feel unsafe as they do with sharrows and
Right.
provide them.
So this is a direct response to several things that we heard in the public round or public involvement round. The top priority being safe routes to school. So what would an 8-year-old feel comfortable doing? And that's where that 10-foot ideally side path would come in. That's amendment what's required for bi-directional bike travel, and would be appropriate for that elementary school or middle school target user. However, there's different types of bicyclists, as we're all aware. So while, young kids and families on a bike ride may feel better to use a side path, more confident and enthused cyclists would still continue to travel in the travel lane and share it with cars.
Okay, understood.
All
right,
and one of the alternatives evaluated here was a separate bike lane, either bi-directional or on either side of the street. And just looking at the broader corridor context and the construction feasibility of that, it was going to be very, very challenging going forward. So we felt like the shared path on one side of the street and widening the sidewalks on the other side of the street would still allow us to effectively address the concerns of families and schools on the corridor.
Okay, so I guess to summarize, the side path is meant to be bi-directional.
Correct.
And still have enough space to accommodate folks, like the mobility aid that you're demonstrating there, the person in the
Correct.
wheelchair. Okay,
Correct.
good. All right, happy to hear that. Thank you. All right, Councilor Murillo or Coombs, do you have any questions or comments?
I do, Councilmember Marcano.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, so yes, I was really excited to hear about what sounded like some canvassing. So I know that's something I know I've said for years. I know, two other colleagues on the committee have also expressed an interest. So I'm really happy to hear that, and I hope we continue that moving forward. Um, I will say that this all looks good. My one, I guess, question, maybe it's a concern, is on the north side design. Just I guess for some context, I think the thing I'm thinking of is like, how do we just make it feel like like there's parity, of like improvements on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
As you can see, right, one is like there's multiple trees, lots of buffer, like more landscaped. Obviously, there's parking on one side. Like if you live on that north side, now you just have a like a wider sidewalk, but there's just a parking lane. And I can't help but feel like even though there's that parking lane, that's a bit of a buffer. If it doesn't make sense, or if there's any capacity to put even just another strip, like shorten, I don't know, like I don't know if shorten even makes the right sense, but like something in between the park lane and the actual sidewalk. Like I think of folks who, you're right up against cars. Like maybe people are
Mm-hmm.
worried about scratching the cars. You could open your car door and not realize somebody's like on the path on a bike or walking and like smack into them. Like it just feel like that like physical proximity to a vehicle still doesn't feel very safe. Or yeah, I also just as a pedestrian, right? Like if I were to walk, like the left side of the street definitely feels more inviting and
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to the right side of, if you're looking at it this way. So I guess this was my only thought, is like to not create like a better side of the street or a better half. Like I know that sounds like, we're improving it all. So I think people will welcome that. But, the back of my mind, I'm thinking along 25th, like that's a very stark difference, right? Like the new development with the wider sidewalks, landscaping, more like newer housing, and then the other side is like the really skinny, narrow sidewalk that goes right to the street, and then the homes there that are the older homes. It just
Right.
feels, I don't not suggesting that that's the same feeling here, but it was a little reminiscent of that concern I had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we did make sure that both sides of the street would be improved. Widening that sidewalk from, the current uh, 2.5 or 3 feet to 5 to 6 feet minimum. That's much more comfortable for use of pedestrians. The parked cars, when we're reducing the amount of parking on 13th Avenue and providing amounts that are actually being currently used today, um, we'd be focusing those parked cars on the north side of the street, and that will provide a sense of separation between pedestrians and vehicular traffic. And that narrowing of the street will also have an inherent effect of slowing down traffic, ideally. Not shown are also several traffic calming improvements that were recommended in the project, including locations of pedestrian bulb outs, raised crossings both across 13th Avenue and across cross streets, and other traffic calming elements. This was a balance between, how much, not only how much right of way was available in the street, but also how constructible any improvement was. Even though you have X amount of right of way, when you go for construction, you actually need more distance than just the immediate improvement. You need areas for the equipment to dig into back of sidewalk in order to route that out, and that will affect it. And so if we expand beyond the property line, that makes it much more challenging. Also on the north side, on one segment, there's a number of houses. I believe it's between Peoria and Potomac. All those houses on the fronts on the north side have their front yards fronting 13th Avenue. And so there was also some discussion about, perception of would people prefer their side yard be taken or be improved with a side path, or would people prefer their front yard be improved with a side path? And it was generally thought that people value the utility of the front yard more, and so would have stronger concerns if we were taking part of their perceived front yard and widening that side path. And so that's why we stuck with a side path on the south side.
Gotcha. And it sounds like we're trying to reduce costs by using the existing curb and just pulling out extending the sidewalk on the north side, right?
Yeah, and I wouldn't describe it as reducing costs. It's more on recognizing the current right-of-way impacts, and just by using the existing curb on the north side, we can still provide that widened sidewalk.
Okay. I mean, I don't know. I guess I still can't help but feel like that would still be, I obviously like, I think it's clear it's my preference, but um, yeah, I don't know. I guess visually that's just like the only thing that really stuck out to me, that there was a planting strip on both
Mhm.
sides, some sort of landscaping on both sides of the south side um portion, whereas the north side doesn't necessarily have that. And if there's any way to even just put a small one, not to obviously mess with people's property lines, but is there a way to shift, a foot um in between the parked car and um the sidewalk as well? Because I also think, like, we've been having conversations around car thefts and, like, perceived safety, whether or not that's like a particular issue in the neighborhood, like people walking close to people's cars,
Mhm.
I think is another way to think about like perceived safety, not just from the pedestrian standpoint, but people who park their cars. And then it sounds like all the other things about traffic calming, all those things will kind of um multiply to create that perceived sense of safety. But somebody could just like has the access and crimes of opportunity, obviously a
Right.
foot or 2 foot buffer really isn't necessarily going to deter folks, but it might, right? If you're walking and it's just easily to, you're literally right next to the car, like the ease of access, I think is what is kind of top of mind in that scenario. So I don't know, that was just a thought, like, is there any way to take a foot or two from the other side to create a mini buffer planting strip on the north side in between the parked car and the pedestrian? But yeah, that's all.
And I'll mention two things in response to safety. Well, two things. One is this project also identified pedestrian scale or human scale lighting along the corridor, lighting needs along the corridor. So it identified specific locations where we would install those pedestrian scale lights to improve the overall illumination for people traveling along 13th Avenue. I think that will do great wonders for the perception of safety. And also, I'll mention that the outcome of this current study will just be 15% design. And so, as this goes forward, if we move into the next stage, which would reach it to 60% design, there may be opportunities in this next stage of design to identify ways to provide that type of buffer that you mentioned on the north side.
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Excuse me, Tom, real quick.
Oh,
Victor here, Public Works, just wanted to jump in and echo that. Kind of what's demonstrated in the screen is some variability there, trying to be context sensitive, understanding we got property constraints, utilities, and Tom's absolutely right. You know, as we move forward into the next phase, deeper into design, that's something we certainly will be looking to explore, Councilmember.
Thank you.
I guess if I can just jump in on that same point, on the north side, it does look like there's some existing trees kind of throughout the corridor. But is there going to be an opportunity potentially, I think along the same line of thought as Councilor Murillo to add additional trees? And I guess what is the difference in shade quality and heat reduction between trees on the north side versus the ones that you've got demonstrated there in that section on the south side?
Yeah, we didn't look at the difference in heat quality or shade quality for the street trees, and I think the trees that you see there are just illustrative. You know, if there's a current tree on the north side, I think it would be for all intents and purposes. We want to maintain and keep that current tree and certainly minimize impacts. And we've also talked with the city's forestry division about how to minimize impacts on trees in this segment. What you're seeing here again is just pretty illustrative. So I don't think there was any intention to have no trees on the north side and push them all to the south side.
Okay, good. Happy to hear that. Thank you. Councilmember Coombs?
Yeah, so I just noticed there was also the discussion of selected segments in the next steps as far as the 60% design. So is this project going to be built out in phases? Like how does that work, and what's the determination of which segments are going to be built out first?
Yeah, and this is a 5 mile corridor, and it would be very challenging to build it out all at once. So the thought was to bring select segments up to 60% design, and those segments are still to be identified, but they would probably be segments near and adjacent to schools, just to fully leverage the safe routes to school opportunities, both for students, and then there may also be funding opportunities to improve those segments. And then the thought was, instead of bringing the entire corridor up to 60% design, where we may not be in a position to improve the entire corridor right away, by the time we get to some of those latter segments, the design standards may have changed, and so we would have needed to update those designs anyways. So the thought was to identify preliminary segments that we're prepared to improve, design those segments, and then pursue funding for those segments.
Okay, and then in the meantime, because it sounds like it's not necessarily going to be kind of like one section, then the adjacent section, then the adjacent section. It's prioritized based on schools, which makes a lot of sense. How is the difference between the improved segments and the unimproved segments going to be managed in that phasing process?
Right. So we would identify segments based off their individual utility. Segments that capture natural water or natural walking sheds, for instance, or that are bisected by or that are separated by major arterials. And that way, as we improve a segment, hopefully the perception is that the improvement doesn't just end at an arbitrary point. That improvement would end where people feel like it makes sense for that improvement to end.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Any other questions or comments from the committee? Seeing none, I want to thank you again for the presentation, Tom, and Victor, you as well, for your comments.
Great, thank you.
This was for information only, correct? So
Correct.
all right, great. Well, very excited about that. So thanks for the update. All right, moving on to 4B. consideration to approve a resolution for an IGA between the city of Aurora and the city and county of Denver for the Peoria Crossing Bridge, right? Yep. Alrighty. So Matt Kazakowski, you've got the floor.
Sure. Just give me one moment to share my screen. Okay. Okay. Good afternoon, committee members and Chair Marcano. My name is Matt Kazakowski. I'm the Transportation Project Delivery Manager, and I'm here to present the IGA between the City of Aurora and the city. Oh, I'm sorry. I have the wrong one. That's the next one. I'm in the wrong order. I looked back over at the slide. I was like, that's not the right slide. Yes, sorry. This is the IGA between the city and county of Denver and the city of Aurora for the Peoria Crossing project. A little bit of project history, since this goes back quite a ways. The project was sponsored by Dr. Cog, Denver, Aurora, as well as RTD. And the project cost was approximately $60 million, with the lion's share of that cost coming from a Dr. Cog tipped grant as well as RTD Faster grant. The goal and the scope was relatively simple. It was to provide a grade separation over Peoria, over the Union Pacific facility, including the new RTD A-line facility that was being constructed parallel to Union Pacific. And the Peoria corridor itself is obviously a key connection for the Anschutz campus to I-70. The project was solicited by a design build alternative delivery contract in 2012. And it was open to the public just 2 years later. Really was a success of leveraging federal funding and utilizing an alternative delivery method to meet the associated grant timelines that can sometimes be challenging when you chase those federal dollars. The project even won a couple of awards, the 2015 ERN Mountain States Best Project, as well as the APWA's Best Colorado Transportation Project. Here's a representation of the project's improvements, as well as you'll see some very simplistic coloring. It kind of represents the general approach of the IGA, though. Everything on the Aurora side is Aurora, and everything on the Denver side is Denver. With, of course, the bridge itself being a shared responsibility. General overview of the IGA responsibilities is as follows. The document identifies the ownership, operation, maintenance, and reimbursement responsibilities, and it establishes clear guidance on the definitions of what repair, rehabilitation, and replacement are. A lot of lessons learned there from staff. This is important because those terms can mean different things to different people, and we really wanted to get down into the specifics of what is a repair, what is rehabilitation, and be specific to the different elements of the structure so that we have a clear path forward with our maintenance partner in Denver moving forward. As I'd said before, beyond the structure, each municipality is responsible for their own approach. And the routine maintenance is split, where Denver is going to be performing routine maintenance on the structure itself, including the road surface of the structure, and Aurora is performing snow removal and street sweeping of the structure. So there's a partnership there in the routine maintenance as well. And with that, that concludes my brief presentation. I'm available for any questions you might have.
All right. Thank you, Matt. I do not have any questions. Councilor Coombs or Murillo?
I do not have any questions.
Nothing from me. Thank you.
All right, great. Does the committee want to move this forward?
Yes.
All right. I'm good with it as well. Councilor Murillo?
Yes.
All right, great. So that's unanimous. All right, thank you, Matt. And then you've also got 4C, correct?
Yeah, we're queued up and ready to go.
All right, let's do it.
So hopefully this project is a little fresher in the committee's head. Probably as a reminder, this is a DRCOG tip grant in the 2020 to 2023 cycle. The improvements of the Highline Canal from Colfax to I-70. We brought forward the funding IGA to initiate the project about a year ago. And today's agenda item is the maintenance IGA with CDOT for the project improvements. Since that time, about a year ago since we last gave you an update, we've completed the project design. The project is currently out to bid, and we are getting bids back on August 12th. So please send your positive vibes in our direction on that front. We anticipate award and notice to proceed in November, and the project has about a 12-month performance period. The contractor will get the majority of the flat work done, the trail itself along the canal alignment, and then that'll give them time to order the bridge structure itself, because we anticipate that'll have a little bit of a lead time, but those also go up fairly quickly once they do come in. As a reminder, we have a general project scope exhibit on this slide here for the improvements that the project will be installing. The majority of the project is within Denver waters or Highline Canal right-of-way. The majority of the project is an 8-foot wide path, which is covered from a maintenance again, we're here to talk about maintenance. So from a maintenance responsibility that's covered under the existing recreational lease agreement that our Parks Department has with Denver Water. A new license agreement is also in process for the MSC, that's mechanically separated earth, I believe. I hope that's right. Walls. And the structures adjacent to the bridge that will also be within Denver Water's right-of-way. So the proposed IGA that we're talking about today are really focusing on the improvements that are being constructed within CDOT right-of-way, namely I-70. There are references in this IGA to the previous IGA, which also covers Colfax, because this project, or State Highway 40, because this project also touches State Highway 40. So those improvements are covered in the previous IGA. The IGA we're looking at for today is really just that small piece of work within the I-70 corridor. And the terms of the IGA are also fairly straightforward. The existing facilities of I-70 will remain CDOT. That includes all paving, lighting, roadside ditches, ponds, vegetation, as well as all routine maintenance such as snow, ice, and debris removal. The new structures that are being constructed with the project, again, namely just the bridge, the pier landing in the middle of I-70, and the associated walls ramping up to the bridge, will be the responsibility of the city of Aurora moving forward, including any fencing and drainage, and short-term and routine maintenance, including snow, ice, graffiti, and debris removal. So, again, did some quick ones today. That concludes my brief presentation, and I'm available for questions.
All right, thank you again for the presentation. And I don't have any questions on the maintenance side. I do see something that's now giving me anxiety on the design side, but that's another conversation. So I'll hand it off to the other committee members. Do you have any questions or comments?
I mean, I assume that it's the part where you actually still have to cross the street instead of going over, or having some way to not have to cross the street that's giving you the anxiety. I don't know.
On Smith, yeah.
Yeah. I think that was in previous discussions, it seemed like there really wasn't another way to manage that, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
But in general, I am excited about this project. I do not have questions, but I'm glad that we are making those Highline Canal improvements, because it is an excellent amenity for the city, and think the IGA makes sense. So I'm in support.
Councilor Murillo?
I support as well.
All right, wonderful. So we are all in agreement. Okay, so thank you again, Matt, for your two quick but informative presentations.
My pleasure.
All right, miscellaneous matters from consideration. Any committee members or staff members? All right, seeing none, what do we have on the docket for next month?
Yes, Chair Marcano, Victor Rochelle here. Currently, we have two things on the draft agenda. We have a BRT trip and findings discussion with Councilmember Gardner that will be on there. And then we anticipate separately another item from Karen Hancock on EV corridors with CDOT, probably also joint presenting on that.
All right, very exciting stuff. Thank you.
Councilmember Marcano, Ellie
Yes, ma'am.
Watson here. We had promised that we would bring you quarterly updates on the chambers renovations starting this month.
Okay.
I just have a quick verbal update because we finally got the contract awarded to an architect, GSG Architects, and we have a kickoff
right.
next week.
That's exciting. Awesome.
So we will come back kind of quarterly with some updates, but we'll kick that off next week. GSG has quite a bit of experience in bringing older buildings up to more inclusive standards, as well as bringing up to ADA code. And they're actually working in Aurora right now on an ADA locker renovation program. So we're excited to get started, and we'll be back with some more info later.
That's great. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to that. All right, and then our next meeting, are we all good for August 25th at the same time, I believe here? Sorry, my eScribe is cutting off some information for some reason.
Yes, that's good for me.
All right, Councilor Murillo?
Yeah, that still works for me as well.
All right, great, same. All righty, so seeing nothing else on our agenda, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you all so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.